Well, hello, dear B3 people out there, ladies and gentlemen of whatever gender you prefer. My name is Johannes Grenzfurtner. I'm an artist and filmmaker. I'm part of a collective I founded called Monochrome, and over the last 30 years, I've done a fair amount of crazy things. I so far buried around 500 or 600 people alive. I started a festival for cocktail robotics, and I'm also doing a festival for sex machines and all kinds of other shenanigans. But I have to say, it is a huge pleasure for me to be able to the wonderful panel tonight about Feels Good Man, because that's a different level of prankery or global prankery or global craziness or however you want to call it. So a big applause for my two panelists. We have Arthur Jones and Lil Internet. Arthur Jones, where are you actually calling from? Are you in the States?
I am in the States. I'm in California, and I'm outside of Los Angeles. I was hoping to be there for this film festival, but of course Americans cannot wear masks. Capitalism is imploding. So yeah, but I'm happy to be with you here virtually today.
Wonderful. It's great. We have to definitely talk about releasing a new film in COVID times and all that stuff. That's
Sure.
like talking material right there. And we have Lil Internet from Berlin, as I expect.
Well, I'm from the States originally, from Virginia, but I smartly escaped to Berlin a few years ago and have very much appreciated being here since.
Okay.
I'm very jealous.
Yeah. Like in Berlin, you have a couple more Nazis than COVID victims, I guess. But
they're in competition.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
good. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, we are right in the subject, I guess, talking about right-wing extremism, talking about the crazy times we all live in, and it's quite wonderful to see a film condense all of that down to a frog. So for all the people out there who don't know Pepe, I can't believe that you exist. At some point, someone of you has to have like some contact with Pepe the Frog, and the documentary film that Arthur created as his debut as a documentary filmmaker is dealing with this strange and also wonderful phenomenon of Pepe the Frog, like the king of all internet memes. And as far as I understand, that Lil Internet, you collaborated with Arthur on creating this film. Am I right?
I was in touch with them during the process and talked to them a bit. I had, in a past life, so to speak, I had spent a lot of time on 4chan. And so we were in touch about the film, and I talked to them, but I wouldn't say my involvement was essential or a motivation for anything they accomplished.
I understand.
The film stands on its own.
Okay, I understand. But I mean, you were on 4chan, and that's also that's a great hint, because I was on 4chan too for a long time. Pretty much like only as kind of like as a witness, but Moot is actually a good friend of mine. I invited him over to Vienna like 10 years ago before he started working at Google. And the one claim to fame I can concerning 4chan and Moot is that we organized this little urban exploring thing, and Moot and we went outside to this old concrete factory outside of Vienna, and I was walking down the stairs, and Moot was on top of the chimney and peed down. And I got sprayed by Moot. And in a certain way, that's almost like a metaphor for the world. Like Moot climbs up, doesn't give a shit, pees down, everyone gets pissed. And he has to apologize for it. And actually, he apologized to me that he pissed on me, but I'm not sure he ever apologized for the rest. But okay, but let's get right in, because most of the people out there will probably not know what I'm talking about and who Moot is and all that stuff. So,
well, I will say though, we tried to get Moot to be in our film. Moot is he invented 4chan when he was a young person, but you knew him, right, Little Internet?
Yeah, I mean, we actually had gotten him we got him a fake ID to get him into the club for the RaffleCon after party. It must have been 2008 or something like that. So yeah, I knew him for a few years. He also lived in Boston. I believe he was doing something at MIT. I was there at the time too. So yeah, I met him during that era. He's oddly the most normal person, 4chan related person I had ever met. He's a really nice, cool, good guy.
Nice. I think I've been at the same RaffleCon back then. So at some point all the people meet. But okay, let's step back. Sure. Because we're too deep already in the matter. Out there, we have no idea what's going on. But I guess that is the problem with meme culture. That's the problem with internet culture. You need to have a very didactic way of explaining all of that. And your film, Arthur, is really doing a great job of kind of like peeling off the onions, one peel at a time. So could you give us a little bit of an overview for people who have not seen the film yet and should see it, what it's all about?
Sure. I mean, the top of this conversation is emblematic of some of the things that we had to do in the filmmaking, because we wanted this movie is about pretty obscure places online, and those obscure places have their own lingo, their own syntax, kind of their own way of communicating. But we wanted the film to really appeal to a larger group to a larger audience, because ultimately what is happening in the world of social media and happening in these message boards really does affect everyone all over the world, even though it started out in this very niche community. So Feels Good Man is based on a very specific meme. It's based on Pepe the Frog, which is maybe the most popular meme in the world. It's popular in countries all over the globe. But the first version of Pepe the Frog was an image taken from a relatively obscure independent comic book in America made by this guy, Matt Fury. And he had a comic book called Boys Club. And there was one image from one page of Boys Club that was taken. And it's an image of Pepe the Frog saying, "Feels good, man." And people took that image and then they started to use that as a reaction image in early message board culture. And then people started to remix this image of Pepe the Frog. They also took another drawing from Matt's comic called The Sad Frog. And that image of like the sad Pepe became just kind of like the universal symbol for like internet ennui. So that's the beginning of our story. That's the first act. But as you move through the story, we start to move away from Matt Fury, the artist who created Pepe, and into this larger cultural conversation about how trolling moved off of message boards and into mainstream politics. So, you know, we thought Pepe was a really useful tool to be able to tell this unique emotional story about how the internet is affecting all of us.
And it definitely is. And maybe a question for Lil Internet now. How did you witness, so to speak, the birth of Pepe the Frog? So you mentioned that you were on 4chan at that time. So did you use Pepe yourself, or how did you become involved in all of that stuff?
I think Pepe emerged actually towards the later years. I was on 4chan, and around the time I actually left, excuse me, but I remember seeing it used. It was almost kind of like a stoner thing. Of course, "Feels Good Man" was the first. The text was kind of tied with the image, and it was sort of just I don't know. It wasn't a sad frog at first, and I think the story of the sad frog and that resonating further outwards really tells the story, because the original Pepe was the Pepe peeing with his pants down around his ankle, saying "Feels good, man." So my earliest memories of Pepe on 4chan were seeing the "Feels good, man" Pepe, who seems kind of like stoned and blissed out, and it was a lot more innocent and had a much different meaning in the very beginning, and this is very early. Then of course it ended up evolving into, especially when it took a darker turn, whether just becoming this frog or becoming synonymous with the reactionary right wing and white supremacist movements?
It seems interesting that a lot of really interesting stuff grew out of 4chan. So as far as I remember, even Anonymous was a project or something like a movement that came out of 4chan. But Anonymous took a completely different detour than Pepe to a certain degree, who in the end became kind of like a hate symbol, which is a very strange thing for a little frog to be. But so my question for Arthur would be, in this like spectrum of, let's call it internet folklore, is there something that is unique about Pepe the Frog? So is there something about the Pepe meme that makes it kind of like stand out, or is the, let's say, the configuration pretty much like with all the memes the same, but Pepe just made it because of historical coincidences that can't be controlled anyways?
That's a good question, and it's a question that seems to be maybe impossible to answer. We asked every single person who we interviewed for the film that question, why Pepe? And everyone maybe had their own take on it, but there's no real clear way to say why Pepe. I think it has like a variety of reasons. I think it was the right meme at the right time. It is amazing to think that Pepe has now been around for 10 years, which in terms of the internet, that's an extremely long time. I think for whatever reason, Pepe really, I think he's a gross, sad frog. I think people see themselves in Pepe in some way. I think he's the sort of mixture of cute and creepy. I think there's something about him that is arresting when you first see him. We had a lot of responses when we made this film and we were showing it to curators initially. Everyone would sort of like almost, you could see them slowly backing away from the movie poster or something like that, because Pepe really strikes people in a kind of visceral way. And then once over that initial baggage from the image, they would watch the movie and be like, oh, okay, this is actually a film that I like, or a film that like has a very diverse set of interests, and it's not just only about this one specific place on the internet. I think Pepe is innately nostalgic. It feels kind of like a discarded toy from the 1980s. But yeah, I think mostly he's a gross frog. I think he's a gross frog.
If I could add something, it might be worth mentioning that the structure of 4chan itself, just the way it operates, ends up being a sort of instantaneous focus group, like the world has never seen before. Essentially, you would have sometimes tens of thousands of people using the site at the same time, and when you post, it immediately gets pushed down the feed and disappears unless people respond to it. So we're talking about, over 10 years ago, a sort of attention economy on steroids, instantaneous focus grouping of whether or not an image gets attention and reaction or not. So because of that structure, anything that for whatever subconscious reason resonates with people and gets their attention are the only things that end up surviving on the feed of 4chan. So it can find out things that just for some reason resonate better than any other sort of structure ever put together online or elsewhere, to be honest.
That's a good point. And on 4chan, there's also different boards. You can't repost the same image twice. So that really encouraged people to make their own versions of Pepe, to remix Pepe. There was kind of this like jokey competition to make as many rare Pepes as possible. And that just really created this meme that was extremely, extremely popular. There were so many different versions of the meme that people could use them in all the other forms of social media they might participate in. So there's just the sheer number of Pepes is pretty staggering.
And as far as I remember, 4chan didn't have an archive. So people posted stuff and they weren't concerned that would end up in an archive. So people would see who was posting what. So there was a strange form of freedom, like in a positive and also in a negative way, because people just like posted like enormously gross and enormously horrifying things as far as I remember.
Though I will say there are a number of 4chan archives, and in order to make this film, we had to basically go back into these other there's sites within sites. So there are sites that pull 4chan and then they repost it as an archive. And then there's also places where you can basically download all of the memes that people have posted on 4chan in sort of like you can pick a series of months and pull them all down. So that was part of our early editorial process, was basically going through and archiving mostly 2015 and 2016. But you know, 4chan, for as obsessed as it is with anonymity, it's also kind of obsessed with its influence. And so people, you know, there's a board within 4chan called Shit 4chan Says. It's really created its own culture, and it's kind of proud of itself. And so there are archives made by 4chan enthusiasts for other people who want to like be part of this community. And there's memes on 4chan that last decades. You know, there's jokes that people build upon. There's people that there's memes that people are obsessed on and continue to like refine on 4chan for decades. So it is anonymous, but they're also very like they have a sense of self-importance about who they are and what they do.
Yeah, I was expecting that lolcats would be around forever, but lolcats are kind of gone. Like young people don't give a shit about lolcats anymore, and that was kind of like the big thing I remember back then.
Innocent times.
Yeah. So have you been collaborating with institutions like the Internet Archive or Know Your Meme, for example, in your research?
We talked to the guys that Know Your Meme for the film, and it didn't end up making the final cut. We talked to a lot of people who were from the sort of early 4chan era. You know, Know Your Meme, you know, Don Caldwell and Brad Kim were people that we sort of talked to on background throughout the process. And they've supported it for sure. But what we really wanted to do in the final edit of the movie was really kind of explain to people what 4chan means to its user base, how 4chan does create this sort of family, and then that family kind of almost creates a coalition. And it's a group of people that have a unique sense of, they feel like they're outside of society, but they feel this sense of generational entitlement. And so we wanted to really show the people who use the board rather than the people that maybe study the board. And that was our goal in making the film, is making people understand the emotionality and the way emotions travel on these message boards. And then that anger and resentment travels out through larger mainstream culture.
A question for Lil Internet. I read that you are very much interested in Web 1.0, and that's one of your one of the things that I enjoy is internet history and going back and looking at how message boards worked back then and how stuff was to a certain degree different, but also the same. What would you say? What was the moment? So were there memes in Web 1.0? They were not as big, as far as I understand, as with Web 2.0, because the ways the message boards got faster and more easily accessible, as far as I understand. But maybe you know more about that.
Well, I mean, there was certainly, I mean, memes in themselves are sort of as old as signs or symbols. They've been around as long as signs or symbols have existed. I mean, language even works mimetically. In terms of online memes, I mean, the first I remember was being a child on the World Wide Web and seeing sites like Mr. T ate my balls or Chewbacca ate my balls. People would make websites with pictures of Mr. T or Chewbacca, and they'd have like comic book bubbles, and they'd talk about how much they want to eat your balls. That's the first meme I really remember. Of course, popularly, the dancing baby GIF is probably the one that got actually spread as email got really common. It got spread as almost like chain messages or something. But I mean, in terms of, I think I mean, memetics and politics are also, and particularly fascism, fascism leverages memetics extensively in its practice. In terms of the history online, I mean, it's just the incentivized attention economy of contemporary social media is what really put it into, like, as a mainstream common word and understanding, as anything that sort of can spread through a very noisy environment.
I mean, I think you guys are both emblematic of Web.1 in that, you're on these message boards, and then you pass through the message board to meet people like Christopher Poole, who came up with 4chan. The internet was a creative place when it started, and it functioned a little bit more as our artistic community. Admittedly, that's like edgelords and shit posters, and all these people are part of that community. But being on the internet was something that defined who you were. In the same way you might be like a goth or a punk rocker, you were someone of the internet. And then, what we show in the film, this sort of like this anger against quote unquote normie culture, was also a rejection of a new flood of people who were coming in as social media consumers who were not creative. They were people who they felt were kind of like lame and shitty and just kind of like this attention-seeking consumer class that was like coming into the internet. And that was like offensive because they felt like the internet had been the dominion for clever people, for nerds, for people who are like obsessed with like the more obscure parts of culture. And so it is interesting because the internet 1.0 kind of did have like this self-curation that was happening because there were people who were choosing to, this was their subculture or their youth culture for the two of you guys. And now the internet is just kind of like awash in everyone. The entire world is on the internet. People who didn't even have landlines on their phones, didn't have landlines in very rural areas in these like countries that don't have like great infrastructure now have a cell phone and they're on Facebook. So it's really just changed the way we all communicate. And memes are the most potent, fast way for us to get our ideas across. And they're also the most potent and fast way for attention-seeking political bullies to basically build coalition. And we're seeing that all over the world.
So what do you think, at what point can we say that Pepe actually turned evil? Is there a point? Can you go back to a certain message board and say like that's where it all started, or it is kind of hard?
Well, since this is a conversation with two people of Internet 1.0, I would say the moment that Pepe turned dark was something we couldn't include in the film. There was a moment where people started to make scatological Pepes. They did poo-poo pee-pee Pepes, which was this meme on 4chan. That was the first wave of trying to make Pepe untouchable. And that was just, it was as gross as you could get. And after that, I found messages on the board that were like, we need to basically do the same thing people did during the Satanic Panic. We need to make Pepe as offensive as possible. And there's been this meme on 4chan for years to Nazify things. Like you would see like the early, like people would show up to like early 4chan gatherings, often dressed up almost as like cosplay, some of them wearing Guy Fawkes masks, and they would perform a human swastika in public or something like that. It was always this joke. And, but this joke was sort of happening simultaneously to the politics board on 4chan getting really obsessed with fascism. And a lot of people who were feeling like really, really, really left out of the conversation, and this was making them angry, and they were really yearning for some sort of like authoritarian control of their personal lives, and then also an authoritarian control of culture. So I don't know. I'm sure you have other stuff to say about that little internet. That was a little broad on my part, but.
No, I think though in the film you explain it really well in regards to, as soon as normies started sort of co-opting the Pepe meme and using it, that's when 4chan started sort of put the pedal to the floor and made the most offensive versions of it that they could, which really makes sense in terms of my experience with 4chan culture as well, because 4chan was this really vibrant community that kind of operated on anonymity, and the phenomenon of people having a social media account, posting pictures of themselves just out to the public, like hosting streams and talking, like the internet, and it relates to what Arthur was talking about earlier too, about how like the internet was kind of a special place. It was almost like being into goth or punk. It was like, it was gate kept. Like the people online, it had a barrier of entry. You had to have a certain kind of interest or be a certain kind of person to use the internet at all. And 4chan was very protective about gatekeeping the internet as this special place where there were no rules, purely anarchic. And once real life started coming into the internet, like for me, it was Facebook's real name policy being enforced as kind of this moment you can see a big shift in internet culture. So what essentially, I mean, 4chan used to troll the early vloggers, things like that. Anyone who made their real self too public online could end up being a target. And so when normies started sort of recuperating and using 4chan's memes, they did what they do best, which is turn it into the most offensive thing possible. And then I think, as Arthur said, there was this confluence of political factors and the power of that meme and the desire to do something bad with it that sort of created the perfect storm that ensued, if that tracks with you, Arthur.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Pepe was really used in this way that becomes like this circular internet dialogue about what someone's true intentions are. And so people could post an incredibly offensive Pepe, and then they could say like, oh, I'm just kidding. I'm one of these people that is just, I find to be, the edginess of the content is super funny to me. But then it ultimately kind of puts those ideas forth in culture in a broader way. And then also within that, there are people who are using it actually as propaganda and as a method of like trolling. And part of trolling is gaslighting people. So Pepe became this tool for gaslighting people. You would post a racist image of Pepe, and then someone would call you out on it. You'd say, it's just a dumb frog. You're silly for falling for this joke. And so it becomes this kind of age-old obfuscation. Where people who are seeking to gain power are using art and culture and history and politics in a variety of ways. You know, Nazis have always been trolls to a certain degree. They use disingenuous claims to further a very genuine narrative, which is fascism. And so you had these kids LARPing as fascists, and some of them ended up becoming fascists at a certain point, I think. And so Pepe is this, we view the film as kind of a work of media studies. It's something about how we all just have to understand how these memes are able to carry so many different kind of messages and meanings at any one time that we really have to be smart and critical and think about them in a pretty serious fashion so that these other forces within our culture aren't going to use and leverage them cynically to gain power.
It's also about network effects, I think, right? If you have this meme that's funny and it spreads widely, and then you realize it's actually hinting at a racist or fascist form of politics, you happen to have those inclinations or beliefs buried somewhere in you. You suddenly feel like you're not alone in those feelings, even if it sort of slides through with a joke. And the more Pepes you see, the more comfortable you feel actually taking those beliefs and feelings seriously and feeling like there is a crowd, there are other people who think this way, and Pepe becomes a representation of that. And yeah, of course, the network effects of all of society being connected at the same time has led to a lot of the socio-political conflict and developments we've seen now, largely for the worst.
So do we, at some point in the near future, need something like media literacy classes at schools or meme literacy classes? Because it seems that Pepe the Frog and all the stuff that's going on in meme culture has fundamental like repercussions in real life, and we saw it with Pepe, or at least we believe that it happened. So how can we teach people about what's going on, about this like multi-layer meta jokes that might really breed actual fascists?
I mean, certainly I think media literacy classes would be a start, but I think the real problem is the attention economy. And I don't know how we start to move away from an internet that right now, when people think about the internet, they just now take the attention economy for granted. And we've already talked about how 4chan sort of operates as its own attention economy. It's an attention economy of extremism, but there's this other economy that's happening right now where basically all of our emotions, our likes, the things that we enjoy are leveraged against us, and we've just been basically turned in to a natural resource. And there's not really like a market force that's wanting people to really understand the attention economy. So I do think there's going to have to be sort of a breaking up of these different social media bodies in a way that is going to allow all of us as humanity to move forward, honestly. I don't know. Maybe that sounds a little like vague or grandiose, but I don't know. That's how I think.
I think media literacy classes, everything else is like absolutely necessary, but it's going to take a whole lot more. I think we need to also just figure out tactics on this new battleground, and it's very difficult because we're dealing with the loss of a shared truth or a public commons in general. But media literacy is certainly a step in the right direction. And I mean, I find it just absolutely absurd that, we've unleashed this new medium on the world that people spend up to 80% of their day on, and expect it to not change cognition, not change perception, not change the way things operate, and not even nudge anyone to think in a meta sense about this medium, the fundamental difference in rules and the economics of it compared to the real world. And I think it was just a social. It's like some sort of radically huge social experiment that has just been unleashed, and we just anticipated we're going to figure it out as we go along. I find it baffling, and I really hope media theory and literacy is taken very seriously moving forward. It needed to happen a few years ago, to be honest, like 10.
We have to figure out a way to reconfirm the truth in culture, because we've already seen how this plays out in places like Venezuela, where there's no journalism that's happening in that country. And so the only thing that is basically, the country is organizing along conspiracy theory, because there's no way in which government only seeks to gain power kind of as a mafia state. There is no journalistic class. There's no economy for journalism. So these conspiracy theories are ultimately tearing that culture apart and make it impossible to be governed. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit in America. The right wing of America has fully embraced these conspiracy theories, and people within the power structures know that these conspiracy theories are ridiculous. They understand that, but they also can't speak out against it because they feel like they're sort of like betraying their base voter class. And so people are choosing then to tacitly validate these conspiracies. And it's something that we just really have to figure out as a population, because otherwise this sort of fringe behavior is going to keep getting sort of like, is going to just keep spreading throughout the attention economy, and ultimately win people over who don't have the ability to discern truth from fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we have seen it through COVID. And in the case of COVID, it's actually resulting in people dying, which
Yep.
is extremely horrible to see. But maybe a question for both of you, also leading a little bit into the whole question about how to release a film in times of COVID and all that stuff. But what is your perspective on what has from a media perspective, but also from a general political perspective, what are the, let's say, like the fault lines, the political fault lines or problems in American society that have been kind of like breaking up because of the COVID pandemic?
That's a huge question, and it continues to shift constantly. I mean, I think the biggest thing though is that it shows a real it's a lack of leadership. Rather than sort of being able to trust the Centers for Disease Control, being able to trust experts, the executive branch, Donald Trump, is basically sort of using this as a chance to basically spread a variety of different conspiracy theories. No one knows what's true or not. And they're sort of basically using that as a tool for manipulation and power. So there's a lot of people who feel as though their skepticism about mask wearing or the way that the disease spreads is being validated by the president, and then therefore they think that they have like the authority to act on others. And so that's becoming it's becoming a heartbreaking situation in America right now, where different parts of the country don't want to talk to other different parts of the country. Families don't want to talk to each other. I can't talk to my father about any of this stuff. He's completely gone down the Trump rabbit hole. But the other thing that you're seeing in America is basically the end of conservative Christianity. And obviously, the people that have been holding on to Christianity in America have been a very fundamentalist group of people, and they're people that are already embraced in a different kind of irrationality. They believe that the end times are happening, and they sort of see COVID, all of these other factors, the protesting that's going on in America. They see this as hallmarks of like an end time that they believe was going to be happening anyway. And they're choosing to run into the abyss of this irrationality than just like sort of sit back and understand that this is a disease that can be contained. So it's a frustrating moment to be part of, because it's so hard to cogently talk about and understand, because it's so complicated and you feel lost within it. And that apathy is something that is a tool unto itself. It's this kind of hyper-normalization effect where people who are smart and intelligent and trying to think about things sensitively and critically feel as though they have no power and they're just awash in their irrationality. And so they kind of sit back on their hands and don't speak out. So I don't know, that's how I'm feeling about it this morning, in the middle of lockdown in California. That's also on fire. The air quality is terrible. We're having a really hard moment.
Yeah, Lil Internet, you escaped to Berlin. How do you see the whole thing from afar? And yeah,
I mean, there's for a long time there's been so much just material precarity in the States as well. I mean, it's really a big driver of the reason I left. I'm a freelance video director, and I was living in New York, and it was just totally untenable to feel safe in any sense, not having a steady stream of income. And if you add factors like race into that, it's an intolerable sort of way to live, a constant low background radiation of feeling in danger. I think it is sort of been the mode of life for the vast majority of Americans for quite some time now, and it's always been sort of walking on a razor's edge. I think the COVID just sort of accelerated a collapse that seemed to be inevitably going to happen anyways, but. You know, I hope to see some good come out of it. but it also concerns me because since everyone is stuck at home, everyone spent all their time online. And while the country is literally on fire and they're facing a huge eviction crisis because of the simulated space everyone's spending most of their time on, I see less and less grip on the material realities and more the Americans preoccupied with these either idealistic or symbolic conflict, and not to mention the radicalizing aspects of the online space. I think has pushed things to further extremes than I remember seeing before. Of course, further polarization. There's a lot of energy, a lot of anger on the streets. There's a lot of motivation to do something. But so far, it's discouraging to see it not cohesively directed into any clear direction. And also, there is a lot of apathy. A lot of people who sort of, I think, have had enough and feel like it's like, well, we might as well just have a total collapse, civil war, revolution, violent uprising, whatever, because they don't believe in voting. They don't believe in any sort of reformative resolution for this. And it's something I'm both sympathetic about and utterly terrified by.
When I watched your film, Arthur, just a couple of days ago, the film is not about COVID, but at the same time, when I was watching it, and you probably finished it during COVID times, although it's not a film about COVID, I constantly had that feeling of like, this is like the fundamental problem we're seeing in your film about this little frog and the cartoon artist who created him.
Yeah.
Suddenly we saw play out in the real life in the most horrible way. So it's pretty much like it's almost like it's like seeing like how epistemological warfare works, and you see you see it with the example of the frog, and then you watch the television news and you see it like pretty much like the entire Trump government doing it in a very similar way. At least my perspective.
We finished the film before COVID times. We
Okay.
finished it in early January.
Okay.
And it's funny now. There was an article that I think it came out in The Guardian about how the Sundance Film Festival was a super spreader event, and they show a party at Sundance, and you can see myself in the corner of the picture. We released it before COVID. We had the film done before the election because we felt like it was timely. And, our hope was that it would also be seen by people on both sides of the cultural divide because it's a film about Pepe the Frog, and it's such a polarizing thing. We released the film before, and then we tried to take it out in the middle of these sort of cascading shutdowns. So actually, I was on the way to Europe to show it in Copenhagen. And also in Greece, I was going to do a little bit of a tour with the film. I'm going to go to Dockville, go to Berlin for a minute, and then I would sort of cancel one ticket, hoping that the closures would not go another month or something like that, and then they just keep kind of like cascading forward. So had to just kind of like cancel the film tour, which was fine and the responsible thing to do. But yeah, we had no idea this was going to be how we were releasing the film. But I do think that the film has actually become more, I think it's an important story about how we learn from our recent history. It's about the 2016 election, and here we are in another election cycle, and there's a different set of completely surreal irrealities that we're facing as a culture, and it's only magnified since 2016. So I think it's something that I hope that people will see the film and then maybe apply it to whatever's going on right now and understand the parallels. The biggest parallel here in America, certainly it's all of the COVID conspiracy stuff, and then it's also the rise of something called QAnonymous, which is started out as a 4chan joke, and now it seems to be kind of the prevailing narrative from anywhere between 5 to 25% of the country. And so that's also another sort of angle to our story that people are talking about.
I think I mean, this may sound a little bit cheesy, but one thing I think is really important about the film too is that it connects this image, this meme of Pepe, to a deeply human and intimate story. And to me, it kind of just snaps you out of, I think online you get in this mode where you don't really model the world in actually very much detail. You're thinking about the entire world and everything going on and people's struggles, et cetera, all the time. But you don't really get granular with how you render the individuals and the effects of all of these images and statements and things going on. And the fact that the film so richly sort of puts this detailed, like, fully 4K HD rich intimate human story connected to that green frog you've seen everywhere in all of these horrible contexts, I think just reminds you that, like, the internet isn't real life, but everything behind it, they are like full people with rich, nuanced, and deep stories, and it kind of just renders the thing back to the human again, which I think is something that is often lost when you're just sort of in cyberspace and dealing solely with the virtual. You sort of lose track of how vast every individual life is and how these symbols are actually connected to real human people with as much of a rich experience of life as you have.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. That was definitely our goal in the film, is we wanted it to be kind of a rejection of the transhuman nature of the internet. Matt is a very, like, the way we approached the filmmaking was the sections where Matt is in, that's the analog world. We used a different set of instruments in the compositions. Matt is drawing with colored pencils. He has a very rich family life. And then we have the internet world that sounds and feels differently. And so we really thought that, explaining that, like, maybe if you're just uploading Pepe into the vacuum of your anonymous message board, the butterfly effect of that really, the butterfly effect of that is that it affects real people and it affects them negatively. And hopefully, I don't know, hopefully it will just kind of be like something that will resonate with people as they watch it, and maybe think about how their online habits are sort of affecting culture as a whole. And, it has been nice as people watched it. We've gotten a lot of really positive responses. People ask us a lot about trolling and that kind of stuff, but the reality is people's responses to the film have been extremely warm. People are emotionally moved by the film. We've gotten, dozens of messages from people who are like, "Oh, I spent my youth on 4chan and this film really emotionally affected me." They're like crying at the end of it. And, I think what maybe we're all getting at is there needs to be some sort of more human-based internet where there are, where we're not sort of like, where us being on it isn't making money for these huge corporations. Us being on it is a way that we're actually connecting with people. And certainly when Matt was making Boys Club, he had like a group of artists that he was part of. They were all making comics together. They were all living in the same neighborhood. They would meet at the bar afterwards, and Matt would be drawing in the corner of the bar. And Pepe then ended up resonating with a group of people who maybe felt like they were also creative, but their community was not real. They're people that don't have those sort of personal connections. They don't have that reality testing. And so, I think that, I hope that people see the film and maybe think about their online habits and feel like they're maybe learning something in a way that feels personal to them.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
So, I mean, of course, there are hundreds of questions I would like to ask because, I'm a filmmaker myself. So, when you mentioned the different sets, so I kind of had a feeling that you're trying to separate the online world in the film from the real world with certain techniques. But I think all the questions I could ask would go down the rabbit hole, but we only have like 5 minutes left. So my question would be, number one, that's a question for you, Arthur. Has the film already influenced? So is the lore of the film kind of like looping back into the online world of 4chan, or is there something? Is your film already being used as a material for new stuff concerning Pepe? Do you know about any of that? Because you're kind of part of the Pepe story now. So I wonder what will be done to your film in the vast meme space out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't go on 4chan anymore. I went on 4chan for a brief period of time researching the film and collecting all of the assets for the motion graphics in the movie. And then after that, I very self-consciously closed the laptop on 4chan. I don't think it's a healthy space to be in. Okay. I think, yes, the people that are most interested in the film are people who are on these message boards. And, they have obviously like a predictably varied set of reactions to the movie. But we do hope that at least people now understand Matt's true intentions of the character. There's a lot of memes that have been created of other cartoons, but those cartoons all have like IP lawyers. They have they're based on other things that exist within culture. Like, like SpongeBob SquarePants, people know that that's a cartoon. And so when you see a racist version of SpongeBob, you know that that's a derivation. So at least now, if you are aware of the film Feels Good Man and you see a racist Pepe, you're aware that that is a derivation from Matt's true intentions. Mm-hmm. There were people who I witnessed who assumed that Matt was a neo-Nazi for a period of time. And so I do think that this film helps people really understand the true nature of the character. And we did think about very clearly what memes we included in the film. We wanted the cartoons to feel as though they really had their own real estate within the movie and their own stage presence. So we tried to keep the animations in the film as close to the true spirit of Matt's comics as possible, and then not lean into the world of memes too much. And so I'm sure that they will be remixed. I'm sure that people will do what they will with it. The film has been pirated like crazy. So, that was predictable. We knew that was going to happen when we made it.
Yeah, Lil Internet. I would like to look into your crystal ball, let's call it that way, because you are dealing a lot with the Web 1.0. You are you're following the actual trends, what's going on right now, and what do you think will be, maybe also given what's going on with COVID, do you think how do you think the internet will evolve? Will there be some kind of like some form of change going on, or do you expect that it will just like go on as it is and it will just like be this endless demise that never ends?
Well, one thing that gives me hope is I see a lot more of one term for it is like dark forest communities online, where people are actually sort of retreating from the public social media space and going to private discords or just starting group chats. Something where there actually is a bit more, a little more Web 1.0 and a bit more of a human connection without these external metrics and economics of attention, where the whatever gets the biggest reaction is the most successful. And also a lot of younger people, Gen Z, like they're really not in. They're actually really into privacy. They have sort of like fake Instagram accounts. They make their accounts private. That's an encouraging sign to me. But what I'm worried about is just the average person on Facebook who is getting their news from social media, from whatever shows up on the feed, which is always the thing that gets the most reaction or attention, for better or worse. And also who just don't have the time to, I co-founded a platform and podcast called New Models, where we really try to act as an aggregator and really attempt to find the core truth, or map and model what's really happening sociopolitically in the world. And the amount of labor it takes to actually understand like what's really going on. Like, I can't imagine the average person, especially in America, has the time to just know the truth. And to me, that is a really scary thing. And I'm not sure exactly how it can be fixed. I mean, the fact that the best news sources are all behind paywalls, it kind of set up this situation we're in now. Of course, that's partly the consumer's problem for demanding free news. But regardless of that, I don't anticipate a market solution, though, fixing this either. I really don't know. I just hope that there's some kind of humanistic impulse, and perhaps that, I think Arthur's film at least is an example of a really good way forward of just kind of crystallizing the real life and implications behind the actions online. Because I think a lot of people think right now they're prepared for like the apocalypse, and I think once reality slaps them in the face, they actually might change their mind. But yeah, as of now, I don't know, Netflix's new documentary about social media. I just hope at least it makes people more suspicious about social media in general and its quality as an information source. I wouldn't mind if people started seeing it entirely as just like a garbage source of information. That'll open up new questions in itself, because there are good independent journalists working. But in general, I think we need to kind of think of the internet in a more Web 1.0 way, where it isn't trustworthy, it's kind of shady, it's kind of weird, everything could be a lie, and you approach it with caution.
Yeah, I think, and I have to say, like, I've been really enjoying new models as we've taken this film out. I've been listening to the archive, and it's been really enlightening to think about all of the things that you talk about, and then as we're taking this film out into the world, it's given me a lot of just grist for the mill stuff to consider. I think I'm going to echo what Lil Internet said. Is I don't think there's a market solution for this. I do think there's going to have to be some sort of new version of real, actual internet populism. I don't know how that necessarily could happen, but he also talked about how the fears in America that he was feeling when he was living here, those are very real fears. The fear of precarity in America is real. If you slip and fall, you could all of a sudden be bankrupt because of the healthcare bills that you might incur. And so people are choosing not to be fearful of those things, and instead they're choosing to be fearful in a way that, I don't know, people have always felt fearful: xenophobia, racism, class hatred, all these different sorts of things. And the internet and the attention economy really knows how to leverage those things and tear apart sort of the reality of the fears that they make those seem like consumer issues. And so it's something that hopefully, whether it's The Social Dilemma or Feels Good Man, that it's these films that our mainstream feeling films will have like some sort of net effect on people's awareness. That would be great, but people are going to have to seek them out.
Feels Good Man is vastly better than The Social Dilemma. I would just like to plug.
I agree.
Yeah. So,
the movie's, it's a little bit garbage.
So how can our audience watch your movie? So what is the easiest way to get a hand on it?
Well, we're trying to figure out Germany right now. We are taking the film out independently, so that means that it's it's kind of case by case. We have different deals in different countries. So in America, or if you have a VPN, you can rent it on iTunes, on Amazon, all the different places that you can. And that's sobering too, as an independent artist, is just to realize you have to end up going through these financial gatekeepers. Every rental on Amazon of Feels Good Man, half of that goes to Amazon. Like there is not a great way to distribute films in the streaming era as someone who's a truly independent artist. So, but we're going to be on the BBC. We're going to be the season premiere of Independent Lens in the United States with an edited version of the film on October 19th, which is exciting. We're getting a pretty wide release in Australia, which is awesome. But in terms of Germany, I'm not quite sure yet. I think that festivals like this are a great opportunity for us to get the word out, and we're going to try to bring it to Germany in a little bit more of a robust fashion over the next 6 or 7 months.
Wonderful. Lil Internet, how can people access the new models? What is
it's just newmodels.io is our main aggregation website. We have a Patreon for our weekly conversational podcast, patreon.com/newmodels. And the public podcast is available everywhere, the New Models podcast, everywhere you listen to podcasts.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was a really, really wonderful conversation. I think we're over time anyways. I think we're like 5 minutes longer than we actually should be. So thank you very much. And also thank you, Steen, who is somewhere in the back.
All right. Thank you, Steen.
Yeah, where is he? There he is. Almost. No, there he's not there, but anyhow. So there you are.
No, I'm here. Thanks so much. It was a really, really wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for hosting the film. If you are curious, we did do a long conversation with Lil Internet and his co-hosts on a New Models podcast. People can seek that out. I think one of the better conversations we've had about the movie thus far. This included. This was really wonderful. So thank you, everyone at B3. This has been great.